Deep in a remote mountain region, where endless dense forests stretch out and majestic ranges block the horizon, St. Benedict Monastery stands tall like a fortress of faith. Built centuries ago, the monastery is an isolated place, completely separated from the outside world. Ancient stone walls surround it, sheltering a small but steadfast community, nuns who have vowed to dedicate their entire lives to God. In this place, rules and discipline are strictly observed. Every nun who steps in here has sworn to maintain absolute purity, dedicating herself entirely to a life of prayer and service. No one in the monastery has contact with the outside world, except for a few charitable tasks permitted by Mother Superior Mary. They live in humility and silence, devoting all their time to prayer, labor, and performing sacred rituals. But on one fateful morning, that peace was torn apart by a horrifying event, a nightmare no one could have foreseen. The bell rang out through the monastery, awakening the nuns from their early sleep. The sky was not yet fully light. A thin mist still enveloped the long corridors, where flickering candles illuminated each cold stone slab. The nuns, in their simple black habits, silently lined up, slowly stepping into the chapel. Each of their footsteps echoed softly on the stone, creating a steady, solemn rhythm. Mother Superior Mary, a woman who had led the monastery for over 20 years, stood before the altar, her eyes stern yet full of compassion. The light from the candles glinted on her face, revealing clearly the wrinkles on her forehead. The prayers began to rise, the whispers of the nuns blending into a sacred melody. But just as Mother Superior Mary was about to begin chanting the prayer, a strange sound cut through the silence. A sound of labored breathing arose. A figure staggered, then collapsed onto the cold stone floor. Sister Lucy, a young nun of only 22 years, fell to the ground, her face ashen, beads of sweat on her forehead, her breath coming in broken gasps. The atmosphere in the chapel froze for a moment. The nuns turned in panic, murmurs rising, some standing up abruptly. Sister Agnes, an older nun, hurried over, kneeling beside Lucy, her arms embracing her. "Lucy, what's wrong with you?" Sister Agnes's voice trembled, but Lucy could not answer. She clutched her stomach tightly, her face contorted in pain. Panic spread. Some nuns ran off to seek help, while others clasped their hands in prayer, their faces filled with worry. Mother Superior Mary quickly stepped down, her arms holding Lucy's shoulders, her voice calm but firm. "Take her to the infirmary immediately." Sister Anna and Sister Teresa hurriedly escorted Lucy out of the chapel. As they turned into the long corridor leading to the infirmary, Lucy softly whimpered, her voice weak as if utterly exhausted. Behind them in the chapel, the atmosphere grew heavier than ever. Half an hour later, Dr. Raymond, the doctor urgently summoned by the monastery, emerged from the medical room. He was a middle-aged man who had served for many years in churches and monasteries, but today his face was ashen, as if he himself could not believe what he was about to say. Mother Superior Mary, with sharp eyes, stepped closer. "How is Lucy, doctor?" Her voice was steady but contained a trace of anxiety. Raymond swallowed hard, his hand trembling slightly. "Sister Lucy." He hesitated, then spoke slowly, his voice deepening as if he himself did not want to believe it. "She shows signs of pregnancy." The entire room seemed to freeze. Mother Superior Mary's eyes suddenly darkened. "Impossible." Her voice became icy, each word pronounced sharply. No one in this monastery could commit such a sin. Dr. Raymond took a deep breath, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "I thought so too," he said, his voice filled with confusion. "But the signs are undeniable. Her stomach is slightly protruding, and she has symptoms consistent with pregnancy." The atmosphere in the room grew heavy, as if the entire world had just collapsed. A long silence ensued, a fear creeping into every breath. Then, after several tense seconds, Mother Superior Mary took a deep breath and coldly commanded, "We must examine all the nuns." Her order rang out, but inside her, a profound fear was gradually taking hold. And then, the real nightmare began. The news about Lucy spread like wildfire, but what shocked everyone even more was that when the medical examinations were conducted, not only Lucy, but at least 5 other nuns showed similar signs. Mother Superior Mary felt as if the whole world was collapsing before her eyes. How could this happen? The nuns had dedicated their entire lives to serving God. Not a single man had ever set foot in the monastery. It couldn't be. Yet somehow it had happened. And outside the monastery, rumors began to spread. Whispered words slithered into every street corner, every family. A scandal unprecedented in the history of St. Benedict Monastery was about to erupt. The sacred silence of St. Benedict Monastery was completely shattered when the news about Sister Lucy was confirmed. No one in the monastery could believe that a young nun, one who had vowed absolute purity, could be pregnant. But as the examinations continued, the horror multiplied. Not only Lucy, but 5 other nuns exhibited the same symptoms. Each time a nun emerged from the clinic, her face ashen, her eyes brimming with tears and her hands trembling, the atmosphere in the monastery felt as if an invisible hand was squeezing it tight. The remaining nuns looked at each other, bewildered and fearful, wondering how long this nightmare would last. Mother Superior Mary stood silently in the spacious room where the examinations were taking place, her sharp gaze sweeping over every face. She said nothing, but the hand hidden beneath her habit had clenched tightly, her fingernails digging into her palm to the point of near bleeding. Her whole life had been devoted to faith, nurturing and protecting this monastery as the most sacred home. And now, a terrible defilement was seeping into every stone, every breath of the nun she had led for so many years. How could this happen? Not a single man had ever set foot in the monastery. Every gate, every corridor was strictly guarded, with no contact from the outside. If these nuns were indeed pregnant, then who had done this? And more importantly, how? Dr. Raymond, the respected man who had served in monasteries for many years, now had an ashen face, dry lips, and his hands still trembling after writing the final diagnoses. He looked at Mother Superior Mary, his eyes full of pity mixed with helplessness. I have examined them several times. The symptoms are all the same, completely consistent with the early stage of pregnancy. I cannot explain it. He paused, swallowing hard, then spoke softly, as if fearing that his words might shatter everything. But this is not a mistake. The room fell into a heavy silence. A silence so dense one could feel the pressure in every breath. No one spoke. No one dared to utter even a word of objection or denial. But in the eyes of every nun in the room, the horror was growing. It was not just a fear of facing the impossible, but a deeper dread that the outside world would never believe them. And sure enough, it wasn't long before the news leaked out from the 4 walls of the monastery, seeping into the nearby town like a wave that would wash away all the long-held faith in St. Benedict Monastery. Initially, it was only whispered among the townspeople as they passed by the church, then quickly spread to every street, every alley, to the markets and squares where people gathered to discuss with bewilderment and indignation. Some were stunned, unable to believe that the nuns they revered, the ones they trusted as embodiments of purity and faith, could be involved in such a horrific scandal. Others began to question, could this be God's punishment? Or was there something even darker hidden within the walls of the monastery? The rumors grew even more frightening when someone claimed to have seen strange lights emanating from the monastery's windows at night. Some said they had heard cries, indistinct sounds echoing from a place that should only have contained prayers. Old stories about mysterious disappearances from years past were also dug up. Some even began to believe that the monastery was cursed, but there were also those who could not hide their disdain. They did not believe in curses or miracles. They only believed in one undeniable truth. These nuns had broken their vows, and that to them was an unforgivable sin. Finally, the news reached the highest authorities in the church, and immediately, an emergency meeting was convened at one of the largest cathedrals in the region. At the center sat Bishop Gregory, a powerful man with a stern face and cold, sharp eyes, sitting motionless, his hand tightly gripping the crucifix pinned to his chest. He was famous for his hardline stance, always believing that the reputation of the church was the most important thing, and anything that tarnished its purity must be duly punished. When the news about St. Benedict Monastery reached him, his anger nearly exploded. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice deep yet full of authority. We cannot allow a scandal like this to destroy the church's reputation. Below him, high-ranking priests sat in a long row, no one daring to speak. The atmosphere in the meeting room grew so tense that even the chirping of birds on the branches seemed to be swallowed by the overwhelming weight. But after a while, a young priest, Father Alphonse, cleared his throat gently and then cautiously spoke up. "Your Excellency, we still do not know the whole truth. Perhaps something unusual is happening." He paused, his gaze scanning the faces around him, then continued. "I do not believe that the nuns could commit such a sin. If they are truly innocent, then we must investigate thoroughly before passing judgment." Bishop Gregory frowned, his eyes darkening. "There is nothing unusual," he said, his voice as sharp as steel. "There is only one truth. These nuns have betrayed their vows." Alphonse gritted his teeth slightly, as if wanting to retort. But he knew that any further argument would only inflame Gregory's anger further. Gregory stood up, his eyes sweeping the entire room once more before decisively declaring, "We will go to the monastery immediately. If anyone is guilty, they will face the appropriate punishment." Within a day, Gregory's convoy of horse-drawn vehicles arrived at St. Benedict Monastery. The wheels rolled slowly on the gravel road, producing sharp sounds that pierced the minds of those waiting. Each nun bowed her head in silence, the tension so thick that even the chirping of birds on the branches seemed to be swallowed by the encompassing weight. Mother Superior, Mary, stepped forward, her face still calm on the outside, but inside, she knew that the real nightmare was only just beginning. No sooner had Bishop Gregory set foot at St. Benedict Monastery than he wasted not a single second. He immediately ordered the arrest of all the suspected nuns, cutting off every contact between them and the outside world. The monastery gates were locked tight. Anyone showing signs of dissent was berated and threatened. The atmosphere in the monastery had already been tense, but now it was like a boiling pot about to overflow, a silent prison where no one dared to breathe too loudly. Mother Superior Mary observed it all, her eyes as sharp as knives hidden beneath an absolute calm. She understood that this was not a fair investigation. This was a one-sided judgment, where Gregory already had his answer. To him, the nuns had sinned, and the only thing left was to force them to confess. The next morning, the medical examinations began, but they were no longer examinations. They had turned into a horrific session of mental torture. Each nun was led to the examination room, where Dr. Raymond, together with a group of high-ranking priests, stood waiting. The door closed immediately behind them, leaving the other nuns huddled, trembling with worry. When the first person emerged, her reddened eyes and ashen face said it all. No one knew exactly what had transpired inside, but fear had seeped into every fiber of their being. "They are forcing us to confess," one nun whispered, her voice breaking. Mother Superior, Mary, gritted her teeth. She could not allow this to continue. But Gregory had taken control of everything. From one person to the next, they were interrogated, coerced into admitting a sin they had not committed. Anyone who refused to answer was locked in a sealed room, without food or water, until they were exhausted and submitted. Sister Helen, the youngest nun, only 19 years old, was the weakest among them. When it was her turn to be taken into the examination room, she trembled so much that she could not walk steadily. Her fingers clenched her habit tightly, her breathing rapid, as if about to suffocate. As soon as the door closed behind her, she panicked completely. Her eyes rolled wildly and her legs began to retreat. When a priest touched her shoulder to comfort her, she startled, screamed, and then collapsed to the floor, unconscious. The screams of the nuns outside rang out. Everyone gathered together. Dr. Raymond rushed over in panic, but no one could rouse her. At that moment, the true horror began to spread. If Gregory could force them to confess merely through fear, how long could they possibly endure? Mother Superior, Mary understood that someone had interfered from within. But how? Something was not right. The nuns were pure. They had dedicated their lives to God. None of them had ever left the monastery. So how could this have happened? She did not believe what Gregory said. This was not a matter of personal morality. This was a conspiracy. and it could not have come from the outside. It had happened right within the monastery. Someone had deliberately done this. Someone was intent on destroying St. Benedict Monastery from the inside. But who and why? She knew that if the truth was not uncovered, all the nuns would be ruined. At the same time, another person was having similar thoughts. Father Alphonse, a young priest, stood silently in the monastery courtyard, his keen eyes observing everything that was happening. Ever since this incident occurred, he had felt that something was amiss. He respected Gregory, but he also realized that this man cared more about power than the truth. Why did Gregory want to handle this matter so hastily? Why did he not care about the possibility of outside interference? And why did he want to cover everything up instead of investigating? These questions haunted Father Alphonse, making it impossible for him to ignore them. As he watched Gregory pacing in the monastery courtyard, his commanding voice resounding as he issued orders like a tyrant, a thought suddenly flashed in his mind. Could Gregory be involved in this? Impossible. That was too audacious. But if anyone in the monastery had a motive to destroy its reputation, it was the one who controlled everything at that moment, Mother Superior. Mary knew that she could not fight Gregory alone. She needed someone from the outside to help investigate. But the monastery had been completely locked down. No one was allowed to contact the outside world. If anyone was caught trying to send messages out, they would be punished severely. But that could not stop her. She wrote a letter, a secret letter, carefully sealed. In the letter, she recorded everything that had happened, her suspicions, and a plea for help. She knew there was one person who could help them, Father John. He was an old friend, a priest who had once worked at St. Benedict Monastery many years ago. He did not belong to Gregory's diocese, nor was he under his influence. If anyone could get to the truth, it was him. But how could she send this letter out without being detected? She called Sister Anna to her side. Anna was the only nun still permitted to leave the monastery to go to the market for provisions. When Anna stepped into the room, Mary looked her straight in the eyes and slowly handed out the letter. "Take this letter to Father John," she whispered, her voice soft but resolute. "Do it with the utmost caution. No one must see you." Anna swallowed hard, her eyes wide with fear. "But if they catch you?" Mary gently squeezed her hand, her eyes filled with trust. "You are our only hope." Anna took a deep breath, then accepted the sealed letter. She hid it inside her habit sleeve, trying to contain the trembling in her chest. When night fell, she crept through the dark corridors, her heart pounding in her chest. If caught, she would never have a second chance. She passed through a small gate at the back of the courtyard, where darkness covered the monastery garden. She knew she only had one chance to leave here undetected. But as soon as she stepped past the monastery wall, a cold voice rang out from behind. "Sister Anna, where are you going?" She stiffened, her eyes wide with panic. Before her, a figure appeared in the moonlight. The monastery was held captive in darkness. Could the truth ever be brought to light? Sister Anna froze at the sound of the voice behind her. Her hands clenched the edges of her habit, her heart pounding rapidly in her chest. Under the pale moonlight, Father Vincent stepped out from the darkness. He was not as cruel as Bishop Gregory, but he was also not brave enough to stand against him. Sister Anna swallowed hard, trying to remain calm, though the hand hidden in her sleeve trembled violently. Mother Superior Mary's letter was still there, a living testimony to their secret resistance. Father Vincent moved closer, his eyes fixed intently on Anna. "What are you doing here at this hour?" His voice was not icy, but it carried unmistakable suspicion. Sister Anna took a deep breath, striving to hide her fear. I just wanted to go out and get some fresh air." Father Vincent squinted, his gaze scanning her pale face, then lowered his voice. "I don't think that's the truth." Sister Anna's heart clenched. He knew. For a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. Sister Anna thought of everything at stake. The imprisoned nuns, Mother Superior Mary, Father John. The only chance to expose the truth. If Father Vincent discovered this letter, everything would be over. She took a step back. Father Vincent stepped forward again. A cold wind whipped through Anna's thin habit, yet cold sweat still streamed down her forehead. Suddenly, something flashed in Father Vincent's eyes. Not suspicion, but hesitation. He faltered, as if wrestling with himself. Then something unexpected happened. Father Vincent turned around, took a deep breath. "What are you hiding in your sleeve?" Sister Anna froze. In that moment, she had to make a decision, whether to lie to protect the letter or risk the truth. But before she could answer, Father Vincent shook his head, as if speaking to himself more than to her. "I don't want to know." Sister Anna was stunned. "Go on," he said softly, his voice full of conflict. "But be careful." She could hardly believe her ears. A moment of hesitation, a fleeting glance in the darkness. Then, without wasting another second, Sister Anna turned and ran swiftly into the night. Meanwhile, inside the monastery, Bishop Gregory sat in his office, a glass of deep red wine in one hand and an ancient Bible in the other. He did not pray. He did not repent. He only calculated. Everything was going exactly according to his plan. The nuns had been isolated. All of St. Benedict Monastery was now in his hands. There was no more Mother Superior Mary, no one strong enough to stand against him. And most importantly, the truth would never be revealed. He took a sip of his wine, his eyes narrowing shrewdly with calculation. There was only one final thing to do, to ensure that no one could reach the outside world. Outside the monastery, Sister Anna ran as if her life depended on it. When she reached the dense forest behind the monastery, she stopped, gasping for breath, and looked around cautiously. No one was following her. She continued moving, her feet crunching on broken branches that echoed like rattling teeth in the dark night. Just a little further, she had to find Father John. After nearly an hour, she finally arrived at the church where Father John was staying. She knocked on the door 3 times, following the signal they had previously agreed upon. The door opened immediately. Father John stood there, his keen eyes scanning Sister Anna's tense face. "Come in quickly." She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and then took out Mother Superior Mary's letter. "You must read this," she whispered, her voice still trembling. Father John wasted no time. He tore the seal, opened the letter, and read every word. Within just a few short minutes, his face gradually turned ashen. "Oh my God," he murmured, looking up. This cannot be." "Father, do you believe us?" Sister Anna pleaded. Father John looked straight at her, his voice more determined than ever. "I will not let this continue." He immediately stood up. His eyes shone with determination. "We must act before it is too late." The monastery was in Gregory's hands. Could Father John save them in time? Darkness enveloped St. Benedict Monastery, carrying with it an oppressive fear that weighed heavily upon the nuns confined in cramped rooms with sealed windows, their corridors blocked by the church's soldiers. No one was allowed to leave the monastery. No one could speak to anyone outside. Prayers were strictly controlled, and all they could do was await their fate, determined by those in power. Mother Superior Mary, though stripped of her authority, maintained her unwavering resolve. She knew that unless immediate action was taken, their honor would be forever destroyed and the truth would never be revealed. Since news of the pregnant nuns had spread, the villagers had lost faith in the monastery. They gathered near the gates, shouting venomous accusations, their once reverent gazes now filled with hatred. The sound of small stones striking the wooden gate echoed eerily, and some even carried fire, threatening to burn the place down to purge its sins. Yet, physical pain could never compare to the torment of being forced into silence over a crime they had never committed. In a village not far from the monastery, Father John, a principled priest and an old friend of Mother Superior Mary, received a letter secretly sent by Sister Anna. As he read each hurried line, he sensed the despair and urgency hidden behind the words. His heart pounded faster as a dreadful premonition overwhelmed him. He knew Mary, knew her integrity, and understood that she would never allow anything to tarnish the faith under her leadership. But if the nuns were not truly pregnant, then how could the medical conclusions be so definitive? Without wasting another moment, Father John sought out Dr. Emil Grant, a seasoned medical expert with many years of experience working with monasteries and the church. When he heard about the situation, Emil was momentarily stunned, his eyes flashing with suspicion. He reviewed his medical knowledge, trying to find a reasonable explanation. If indeed many nuns were pregnant at the same time, there were only 2 possibilities. Either they had left the monastery to be with a man, or something abnormal was happening within those walls. Determined to uncover the truth, Father John secretly obtained a blood sample from one of the imprisoned nuns through Sister Anna. The sample was promptly taken to Dr. Emil's laboratory, and when the test results returned, both men fell silent. "They are not pregnant at all," Emil said, his eyes wide with astonishment. Father John's heart tightened. "What did you say?" "None of them are actually pregnant. All the signs they are experiencing, nausea, a protruding belly, hormonal changes, are the result of an artificial hormone." Emil furrowed his brow, his voice tense. "Someone has introduced a hormone into their bodies that simulates the symptoms of pregnancy. This could not occur naturally." A chill ran down Father John's spine. "You mean someone deliberately poisoned them?" "There is no doubt about it," Emil confirmed. "Someone has been adding this hormone to their food or drink over a long period. In a sufficiently high dose, their bodies react as if they are truly pregnant." The pieces began to fit together in Father John's mind. Who had the strongest motive to destroy the monastery's reputation? Who would benefit most if this scandal erupted? There was only one answer: Gregory. Bishop Gregory had long coveted control of St. Benedict Monastery, but Mother Superior Mary had never allowed it to happen. She was a resilient woman, unmoved by any force. If Gregory could overthrow her, if he could prove that the monastery had become corrupt, he could replace her, seize complete control of the inner workings of the monastery, and turn it into an instrument for his own power. He had perpetrated an unprecedented crime merely to falsely accuse innocent people. He had wielded faith as a weapon to manipulate public opinion, turning the entire world against the nuns. He risked his entire reputation to seize absolute power. And most frightening of all, he was succeeding. Mother Superior Mary had been confined, the nuns imprisoned like captives, their honor defiled, and their faith shaken. Without irrefutable evidence, the truth would be forever buried. Father John gripped his hand tightly. Now they had evidence. But how could they bring it to light? Gregory not only possessed power, he also had the church's entire system behind him. He had loyal priests, manipulated townspeople, and an entire squad of guards ready to follow his orders without question. If Father John simply appeared with the test results, he would be silenced immediately. They needed a plan. They needed to bring the truth before those with higher authority than Gregory, those within the church who still possessed integrity. They needed an opportunity to speak before the entire church council, where Gregory could not control everything. And most importantly, they needed additional evidence. A single blood test result would not suffice to convince everyone. They had to find out how the artificial hormone was introduced into the monastery, discover who was behind it, and if possible, identify Gregory's accomplices. They could not rely on theory alone. They needed a decisive blow, a piece of evidence so undeniable that it would overthrow Gregory. As night fell, Sister Anna slipped out of the monastery once more, this time on a greater mission: to collect samples of water and food from the kitchen to test for traces of the artificial hormone. At the same time, Mother Superior Mary, though isolated, did not remain idle. She observed the guards, memorized their schedules, and looked for any loophole that might allow her to reach others within the monastery. But they did not know that Gregory was also watching them. He sensed that something was amiss, and he would not let anyone stand in his way. The battle for the truth had only just begun. The atmosphere in the monastery was as taut as a tightened string, the chill of the stone seeping into Gregory's every step as he stood facing Mother Superior Mary. She did not bow her head, did not retreat. Her keen eyes met his cold, unyielding gaze like an unquenchable flame. The nuns behind her huddled together, some trembling, some weeping silently, but all understood that the decisive moment had arrived. Gregory smirked, his tone dripping with sarcasm and authority. "You cannot win, Mother Mary." Her voice rang out with unwavering determination, not a trace of fear. "We do not need to win, we only need the truth." Those words cut like a sharp blade, causing Gregory to clench his fists, his eyes momentarily betraying a hint of impatience. He wanted to end everything immediately, but a part of him knew that without evidence, she could do nothing to him. Gregory laughed coldly, stepped back and signaled to the guards. "Lock them all up. Await my orders." The guards advanced, their eyes emotionless like machines. The nuns burst into tears and pleaded, but at that very moment, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. The chapel door was flung open forcefully, and Father John appeared, gasping for breath, his robe caked with dust, a testament to the arduous journey he had endured. In his hand, he clutched a bundle of documents tightly. All eyes turned to him. Gregory's gaze darkened, while Mother Superior Mary held her breath. "We have evidence." Those words struck like a bolt of lightning. Miles away, several hours earlier, outside the monastery in the pitch-black night, winds howled through the towering pines, producing eerie sounds. Sister Anna huddled in her habit, her steps light yet hurried, like a deer fleeing from a predator's claws. Her heart pounded wildly, not merely from fear, but because she knew she held the fate of everyone in her hands. The evidence was here within her habit, a medical report signed by Dr. Emil Grant, proving that all the nuns had been poisoned and that none of them were truly pregnant. If Gregory got hold of it first, everything would be over. She could not let that happen. Meanwhile, in Dr. Grant's clinic, the pounding of horse hooves echoed forcefully on the gravel road, torches blazing in the night, reflecting off the steel armor of Gregory's guards. Father John and Dr. Grant exchanged a look, both understanding that time was running out. "Back door," whispered Grant, pushing aside a wooden board to reveal a small tunnel leading into the forest. Without hesitation, they plunged into the darkness, leaving behind the loud banging on the door and the shouts of the guards breaking in. A single misstep, and everything would collapse. Sister Anna ran along the narrow path, her legs aching, her breath coming in ragged gasps, yet she dared not stop. Behind her, the sound of galloping hooves grew louder. Gregory's guards were drawing near. A sharp stone blocked her path. She stumbled. Her habit tore, but she did not care. The file was still there. She struggled to rise, blood trickling from her knee, and continued. Just one more mile. A rough hand grabbed her robe. She screamed, struggling to break free, but another guard blocked her escape. The soldier gripped her wrist tightly, his eyes devoid of emotion. "Time to go back." Sister Anna. Inside the monastery, Father John produced the bundle of documents, his hand clenching it tightly. "This is the evidence." Gregory stiffened, his cold eyes sweeping over the crowd. Then he laughed. "Evidence?" he said slowly, stepping forward with a look of disdain. "A scrap of paper from some unknown doctor? Do you really think that is enough to challenge me?" The atmosphere froze. Mother Superior Mary maintained her composure, though her hands gripped her habit tightly. Father Alphonse, who had remained silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "This is the signature of Dr. Emil Grant." He raised his hand, pointing to the official stamp on the document. "A doctor certified by the church." Murmurs arose among the high-ranking priests. Gregory gritted his teeth, yet he still refused to yield. "I do not believe in mere pieces of paper," he said coldly. "I only believe in confessions." He turned to the nuns, his eyes darkening. "Let one of you step forward. Tell me the truth." He needed someone to submit, a scapegoat. The nuns clutched each other's hands tightly, tears dropping onto the cold stone floor. No one dared to speak. No one dared to bow their head. Gregory was losing his patience. He drew a silver crucifix from his robe and slammed it onto the table. "Who will speak now?" The chapel door burst open. All eyes turned. Sister Anna staggered in, her face smeared with blood, her habit in tatters, yet her hand still clutched something tightly. She had arrived in time. Gregory's eyes widened as he saw another paper in her hand. A second copy. She had been caught, but before that she had managed to deliver the original to Father Alphonse. Gregory had lost. Could he still turn the situation around? Would the truth be accepted? The atmosphere inside St. Benedict Monastery grew even denser. Every eye was fixed on Father John, who had just entered with a solemn face. His footsteps echoed on the cold stone floor, carrying with them an undeniable weight. Truth. Beside him, Dr. Emil Grant also entered, carrying a thick dossier, his face calm yet resolute. Mother Superior Mary took a deep breath and looked toward the nuns who knelt on the ground. Their eyes shone with the only glimmer of hope amid this nightmare. And Gregory, he stood there unmoving, yet his hands had begun to clench tightly beneath his robe. He knew what was about to happen. "Gregory," Father John said, looking directly at the man who had controlled the monastery, his voice unwavering. "We need to have a word." Gregory sneered, folding his arms across his chest, his eyes gleaming with mockery. "A word?" He emphasized each syllable, as if this farce could not possibly concern him. "What is there left to say?" "Father John, these nuns have violated their vows. Their sin is all too clear. No! Father John's voice rang out powerfully, causing everyone in the room to fall silent. None of them are pregnant. That declaration struck the assembly like a bolt of lightning. Gregory froze. The crowd began to stir. Some priests exchanged dubious glances. Others shook their heads, still in disbelief at what they had just heard. Dr. Grant stepped forward and held up the dossier high. "This is official medical evidence," he declared clearly and irrefutably. "I personally tested the blood of these nuns, and I can state with absolute certainty that none of them are pregnant." A terrifying silence blanketed the room. Gregory gritted his teeth yet maintained his composure. "Lies," he spat, his tone full of contempt. "What right does some unknown doctor have to speak here?" "Then let an independent medical board re-examine the evidence," Father John retorted immediately, his eyes locking onto Gregory's, giving him no chance to evade responsibility. Gregory did not answer at once. He looked around the room, his gaze scanning faces that were gradually shifting. The priests who had once stood with him were now beginning to waver. He could feel his control slipping away. Suddenly, another voice cut through the silence. "I can prove that he is lying." Everyone turned sharply. Father Vincent, one of Gregory's closest priests, stepped out from the back rows. The room seemed to hold its breath. Gregory's eyes flashed and his breathing suddenly became rapid. Father Vincent had always been one of his staunchest supporters. Why then was he betraying him now? Father Vincent advanced, his voice calm yet incisive. "I have kept silent for too long." He looked straight at Gregory, his eyes filled with determination. "For all this time, I have doubted you, yet I chose to trust in the system, believing that a church leader such as yourself would never do wrong. But I was mistaken." The hall fell utterly silent. Some priests gaped in astonishment. Others exchanged bewildered looks. Gregory could feel his blood pressure soar, but he was powerless to act. Father Vincent continued, "I have secretly investigated the monastery's financial records over the past 3 months, and he produced another dossier, holding it up so that everyone in the room could see. And I discovered that a large sum of money was transferred from the church's fund to a private medical laboratory." The hall erupted in murmurs. Whispers spread throughout the room. One priest stood up abruptly, his eyes wide with shock. "A private medical laboratory?" he stammered. "Are you saying that?" "Yes," Father Vincent nodded. "A laboratory specializing in artificial hormones." Gregory's breathing grew heavy. Now everything was clear. He had purchased artificial hormones and secretly introduced them into the nuns' food, causing them to display signs of a false pregnancy. All of it was to construct the perfect conspiracy, to overthrow Mother Superior Mary and seize control of St. Benedict Monastery. Mother Superior. Mary took a deep breath, her hands clenching into fists. "Gregory," she said, her voice heavy yet resolute, "you have ruined the honor of these innocent nuns, all to satisfy your own ambition for power." Gregory staggered back, sweat pouring down his forehead. He had completely lost control. He turned to the crowd, searching for a supportive gaze, an escape, a shield. But everyone only looked upon him with cold disdain and scorn. Those who had once trusted him had now turned their backs. A high-ranking priest stood up, his voice resounding throughout the hall. "Bishop Gregory," he declared, his eyes stern, "you have abused your power, manipulated the truth, and betrayed the most sacred values of the church." Gregory trembled. He opened his mouth as if to protest, but no words emerged. He had lost. Outside the monastery, the crowd that had once cursed the nuns had gathered. Those who had thrown stones at them, who had insulted them, now bowed their heads in shame. An elderly woman knelt down, her voice trembling. "We were wrong." A man gripped his hands tightly, his eyes red and pained. "We have cursed the innocent. Mother Superior." Mary closed her eyes. She inhaled deeply, then opened them to look upon her nuns. "We have lost so much," she murmured. Their honor had been restored, but the wounds left by Gregory would remain for a long time to heal. Gregory had been expelled, but could St. Benedict Monastery truly recover from this nightmare? Outside the monastery gates, the crowd still stood silent. Those who had once cursed, thrown stones, and demanded the burning of the monastery now felt only remorse. Shameful eyes, whispered apologies resonating among the stone benches in the courtyard. Some knelt. Others simply bowed their heads before the nuns they had once condemned. Those souls who had been thrust into an abyss of indignity they did not deserve. "Mother Superior, Mary stood silently on the steps, her eyes encompassing everyone, not with a look of reproach or anger, but with profound sorrow. Sorrow for knowing that these people had once allowed blind skepticism and judgment to control their hearts. Sorrow for realizing how easily faith can be distorted under the pressure of fear and power. Bishop Gregory was removed from the monastery that very day. 2 priests escorted him out quietly but with full authority. The man who had once held the highest position in the church in this land was now nothing more than a ghost of failure. As the heavy monastery gates closed behind him, it was not only the end of a power-abusing tyrant, but also the conclusion of a dark chapter that had sunk the monastery in lies. Yet the darkness could not dissipate immediately. The nuns remained, bearing deep scars in their hearts. These innocent souls had been pushed to the brink of despair, enduring long nights of confinement and days filled with suspicion and contempt. They may have been proven innocent, but their honor had been sullied, and their faith tested to its limits. Sister Beatrice still shuddered whenever someone inadvertently mentioned those horrific days. Sister Helen, the youngest of them all, who had once been so terrified that she nearly gave up everything, still looked at people with eyes full of fear, as if she feared that a single wrong word, one misstep, could cause everything to start all over again. Mother Superior, Mary knew that justice had finally arrived, but it could not erase everything that had happened. Therefore, she decided that they must rise up. They could not let the past overwhelm them. They could not allow St. Benedict Monastery to forever be known as the site of the greatest scandal in its history. They had to make the world remember that this place was not only a victim, but also a symbol of resilience, a testament to an unyielding faith. In the days that followed, Mother Superior Mary set about rebuilding the monastery. She did not seek help from the church, from those who had once turned their backs on them. Instead, she reached out to the villagers, people who had recognized their mistakes, people eager to atone. One by one, they came with wood, with provisions, with heartfelt apologies. They helped repair the damaged walls, mend the doors that had been shattered by stones. They could not change the past, but they could do something to make amends for the harm they had caused. And the nuns worked too. They no longer avoided the stares of those around them. They stood tall, working together to restore the compound, cleaning the chapel, and sweeping away the traces of destruction, not only from the walls, but from their souls. Day by day, St. Benedict Monastery slowly reclaimed its former grandeur. But it was no longer the same monastery of old. It had changed. The nuns were no longer those who purely believed in the absolute righteousness of the church. They had witnessed the corruption of power and had learned that not everyone clad in the mantle of faith deserved respect. Yet instead of letting that loss breed bitterness, they turned it into strength. 3 months after Gregory's expulsion, a grand ceremony was held right at St. Benedict Monastery, not to celebrate a victory, but to give thanks, to declare that they were still here, stronger than ever. Mother Superior Mary stood before hundreds, her voice steadier than ever as she proclaimed, "We were once trampled, yet the Lord did not forsake us. We were once cursed, but the truth prevailed. More importantly, we have learned that faith does not reside in those who wear titles, but in our very hearts. Let St. Benedict Monastery be not only a place of prayer, but also a haven of truth and justice." And then something unexpected occurred. Those who had once cursed the nuns now knelt one by one before them. They did not merely apologize, they begged for forgiveness. An elderly woman, who had once shouted to drive the nuns out, wept uncontrollably. "I was wrong. I let fear blind me. I cursed the innocent." Sister Beatrice stepped toward her, her eyes brimming with emotion. She said nothing, only gently bowed and took the woman's hand. Forgiveness could not come instantly, but perhaps this was the first step. And then, one by one, everyone knelt. Those who had thrown stones, those who had turned away, those who had once believed in Gregory's lies. Mother Superior, Mary surveyed the scene, and she understood that their monastery was being rebuilt, not only with bricks and mortar, but with repentance and the hard lessons everyone had paid dearly to learn. And what of Gregory? He was expelled from the church, stripped of all his authority, and sent to a remote monastery where he would spend the rest of his days in isolation. No more sycophants, no more privileges, no one left for him to manipulate. A man who had once wielded absolute power was now nothing but a forgotten specter. He had tried to destroy the honor of the nuns, but in the end, he was the one who lost everything. At dawn the next day, Mother Superior, Mary, stepped out into the courtyard of the monastery and watched as the early sun rays bathed the newly repaired stone walls. There were no more cracks. No traces of the previous destruction remained. She inhaled deeply. St. Benedict Monastery had survived, and it would continue to exist, stronger than ever. The story of St. Benedict Monastery is not merely a simple tragedy, but also a mirror reflecting the realities of life. It speaks not only of nuns who have been wrongfully accused, but also stands as a symbol for ordinary people trampled by power, for slander that can ruin a life, and for the truth that can be cruelly distorted solely because of someone else's ambition. Stop and ask yourself, how many times in life have you witnessed justice being twisted? How many times have those in power used their status to manipulate the truth, to hide crimes, to turn the innocent into criminals? St. Benedict Monastery is just one story, yet similar events continue to occur in our world every day. How many people have been condemned based solely on unfounded rumors? How many have been pushed to the edge simply because someone more powerful wanted it that way? How many have lost everything because society so readily believes what is told, without questioning the truth? We always believe that justice will prevail, but the truth does not come on its own. It does not protect itself. Without those who dare to stand up, to challenge, to confront manipulators, justice will be buried, and the powerful will continue to control the truth as they please. Look at Gregory. He did not only crave power, he wanted to control the way the world perceives the truth. He was willing to fabricate an entirely false story, using the faith of others as a weapon against them. But what ultimately defeated him? Not strength, not power, but ordinary people who dared to speak the truth. Mother Superior Mary, Father John, and the nuns of St. Benedict Monastery had nothing but faith, perseverance, and the courage to oppose evil. They did not resort to violence for self-defense. They held on to one thing above all, truth. And in the end, the truth set them free. Justice does not win on its own. Only those who dare to stand up can defend it. We cannot expect justice to automatically appear. If you witness someone being treated unjustly, wrongfully accused or oppressed, and you choose silence, you are not merely an observer. You become part of the problem. Had Mother Superior Mary and Father John remained silent, if they allowed fear to govern them, then Gregory would have succeeded, and the truth would have remained hidden. We cannot wait for someone else to do what is right for us. Sometimes, you must be the one to stand up, even if it means becoming a lone voice. Do not trust power. Trust the truth. The townspeople erred by believing in a powerful bishop rather than in the innocent nuns. They needed no evidence, no thoughtful inquiry. As long as someone with authority declared it the truth, they believed without question. This is frightening. If the truth can be determined solely by one's status, then anyone in power can manipulate our perceptions. How many dictators have we seen in history who, under the guise of protecting truth, have destroyed the lives of millions? How many innocent people have been executed, imprisoned, or humiliated just because someone in power wished it so? The truth does not reside in the hands of the powerful. Truth exists independently, regardless of who acknowledges it. Always question, always seek evidence, and most importantly, never let someone else decide the truth for you. When people are unchecked, they can become monsters. Gregory was not a villain from the very start. Perhaps at the beginning of his journey, he once held genuine faith. But once he ascended to a position where no one dared to question him, where no one challenged him, he became corrupted. That is the most dangerous aspect of power. Power, without oversight, will always become a tool for evil. We have seen this in history, in politics, in large institutions. When people accumulate power, they begin to think they can act without consequence. This story does not only warn against Gregory, it warns against any system lacking transparency and oversight. where no one dares to question. Always ask questions. Ensure that no one is immune from the truth, regardless of how high their position may be. In the end, when the truth was revealed, those who once cursed the nuns bowed their heads in apology. The nuns forgave, but they did not forget. Forgiveness does not mean erasing what happened, nor does it mean overlooking what was wrong. It means allowing oneself to move forward, but never permitting a repeat of the same mistakes. Forgive those who have erred, but never allow them another opportunity to do so. The story of St. Benedict Monastery is not just about nuns. It is a mirror reflecting our society, how people respond to power, truth, and justice. You might believe that you will never be deceived, but if you do not question, if you do not defend the truth, you may unknowingly become part of the problem. Do you dare to stand up for justice? Do you dare to challenge lies even when everyone else believes them? Do you have the courage to be a Mother Superior Mary or a Father John in the real world? If this story makes you think, if you believe that truth and justice deserve protection, please like and subscribe to our channel so that together we can spread more meaningful stories like this one. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed a similar situation in real life? Do you believe that justice always prevails? Or do you think it sometimes needs someone to stand up and defend it? Let's work together to protect the truth, defend justice, and never let deceit overshadow the light of faith.